I love you in a way that you're a fellow man, and I don't want to see anybody that I know.
Except you just assume my gender. I'm sorry. I'm taking your moment away.
I'm sorry. I should not have assumed your gender.
Yeah, don't.
Do you prefer they?
No,
Z,
he's fine. He's
Zer,
fine.
Zim?
I would just prefer you not assume it. That's all.
You're listening to Unframe of Mind Show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected intellectual intercourse of your life. Your hosts battle the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
Okay, well, I guess I have to know, Daniel, how is it that you came to be friends with Hagatha?
That's hilarious. The first thing that we discuss on this entire conversation is Hagatha Sisti. That's our friend. Our friend Billy does a character named Hagatha. And a few years back, I ran into Hagatha and immediately recognized his satire. But as I was looking at the comments and whatnot, I noticed a lot of people, they didn't quite think that it was satire. They were like buying it, hook, line, and sinker. And so if I remember right, I reached out and we ended up having an interview. We brought Hagatha in for a discussion. I did not tell Anthony about this. We actually have an entire Hagatha playlist you can check out to see how this whole story played out. We didn't tell Anthony at all, Billy or I. And Anthony came into the studio, didn't know what to expect, and I'm just like, man, I don't know what to expect with this character, man. I saw her online, and some crazy lefty, and he was. You could watch the look in his face through that whole first episode. He is being so polite. It's ridiculous. So we just went on and just had a lot of fun with Hagatha, and we do shows together every now and again, and she promotes our stuff, and we promote her stuff every now and again, helping each other out. So it's a lot of fun. So I'll tell you what. Let's jump into the conversation, and I'm going to give folks you a chance to tell people who you are and kind of how we came to even want to have this discussion, or I could do it. I don't care. Who are you?
Well, my name is BJ Spangler, and I'm actually a born-again Christian. I used to be a drug addict and womanizer, and now I'm saved, born again, and I'm actually a youth pastor at my church here in Aberdeen, Washington. And I think that we got into this discussion. We were talking about, I think it was God protecting us from the virus.
Yes.
I'm not wearing a mask because God's going to protect me. And I've heard that a lot.
Oh, you actually have heard that?
I have heard that.
Okay.
And actually, I'm a firm believer that our days are numbered, and that when it's our time, there's nothing we can do to stop that. And when it's not our time, I think we're invincible. But then at the same time, it's kind of like, you're not supposed to tempt God and jump off a bridge without a parachute or something,
Well, so interestingly enough, the entire conversation started around a post I made that basically it was a left-leaning T-shirt quote that said something along the lines of, well, if you believe that you don't need a mask because God will protect you, then why do you need a gun?
Oh, that's right.
Yes, and it was a very. See, as I'm listening to this, I'm going, that is an argument I've heard Republicans or Christians specifically make. Not like all of them or nothing like that, but I have heard them make it, and in bigger numbers than you might think. Well, you might know because you said you heard them, but I don't agree with either one of those points, so I went ahead and posted it anyway, and just to see. I'm one of those shit stirrers that loves to kind of stir the pot, see what people say, and it was very interesting. I found it interesting that people jumped on the bandwagon and wanted to say, in not so many words, well, not all Christians. We're not all like that. We're not all like those crazy people that and it's like that's not really the argument being made, but it was interesting that it's almost this jump to conclusions that happens where you just kind of like instant defense mode, defend my good name, my label that I have attached to myself, and that was I don't know if that was your experience in the comment section.
Somewhat, and there's a little bit. There's some people that support my view as well, and I think that the main problem is we're living in a time that's so volatile and so, I guess you would say, bipolar.
Yeah.
You know, you're either on this side or you're on this side. There's no middle ground. There's no middle discussion. If you don't agree with me, then first thing I do is insult you or attack your intelligence, or, you know, and I just, you know, I don't think that's a way we're going to get anywhere as a society.
Yeah, you make an excellent
not be able to find some kind of common ground, you know.
Imagine that, an atheist and a Christian here having a conversation and trying to find common ground. How does that even happen? Now, for folks who don't know, you are actually my second cousin.
This is true.
Yeah, I mean, not that it really overly matters that much for the particular conversation, but I just thought it was interesting that we started having a discussion. I've never really interacted with you before, other than, you know, here and there on Facebook.
Right.
And if I did, I was too little to remember. You are my. See if I get this right. You are my grandfather's sister's son, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So your mother is my first cousin.
Right. Once you get past about 2 degrees of separation in the family, I start going, I don't know. I think they're related or something.
Right. Well.
So
yeah, and it's not like it's not like we had the family reunion every year and hung out together a lot. So this is pretty much our first real adult conversation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Face to face.
I would like to dig in a little more and get a better sense of, you know, because I'm getting this. I'm hearing that you said you're born again Christian. You had a past with a drug abuse, with as far as being a womanizer and whatnot, things like that. And you've actually come quite a ways since then. So I'm trying to get a sense of, you know, how does that journey take place for you? Can you give us a little more detail?
Well, I'll preface by saying I think that one of the major issues going on in society today is the fact that we have no positive male influences in the homes anymore, and there's no fatherhood is not deemed essential in a household anymore. And I think there's so many men that have cast off that responsibility of being a father. And I think because of that, it's a generational thing, and it's been going on for, you know, of course, my whole life. And I think my father was the same way. He didn't know his dad, and my dad was in prison most of my life. And because of that, I sought out ways to feel like a man, or to be a man. And the people that I was surrounded by were people that were partiers and drinkers and, you know, bikers and strippers. And, you know, so I thought the more I could drink, the manlier I was, the more women I could lay, the manlier I was, the more people I could win a fight against, the manlier I was.
That's all true. And that's all true. Absolutely. Yeah. That's definite marks of manhood in 2020 for sure.
Right. So that was my pattern of life. I got to the point where it was, you know, I'm doing drugs. I'm actually, IV needle drug user at the time. Heroin was my drug of choice.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, don't be sorry. I mean, I beat the statistics, right? I mean, here I am sober now, and that's really a really oddity, I guess, in that addiction. So here I am at I guess I'm getting to the bottom of rock bottom, and doesn't matter who I bring home. I'm always lonely. I'm always depressed and sad, and I'm struggling with you know, suicidal thoughts a lot, suicidal fantasies and whatnot. And, you know, finally I just came to the end of myself, and I was like, I was working in California, and I was driving a articulating dump truck in a quarry down there at nights, and I was listening to talk radio, and I got sick of NPR and was flipping through the channels and found a CSN, which is Christian Satellite Network, and started listening to these preachers.
Okay.
And it just started clicking. It started making sense. And I thought, well, this is exactly where I am, and I'm not happy. And this is all true. And the world is evil. I look around me and I see all these things going on. I was, you know, amateur conspiracy theorist as well, I suppose. So I'm seeing all these things that I perceive as evil in the world. And it makes sense that the Bible says that, well, Satan is the ruler of this world. And until Christ comes back and redeems the world totally, the world is going to be evil. And I realized that if that part of it was true, maybe the rest of it was true. And I really started to immerse myself into the Word and study and listen to preachers. And oh man, the more I learned, the more I believed it, and the more facts I put together that are extra biblical, they all seem to point to God as a creator and Jesus Christ as Savior, and I just I went all in, man.
There was a phrase you used in there that I wanted to dig deeper into. It was interesting. You said you came to the end of yourself.
Sure.
Like what does that mean? I don't. To you, what does that mean? I kind of got a sense, but I'd rather hear. I think
from my perspective, that would be. I don't know if you're familiar with like AA or NA. Mm-hmm. Their rock bottom is you admit that you're powerless to overcome your addiction or whatever. And that was kind of the way I found that no matter what I did by my own power, I could not dig myself out of the hole that I was in. I couldn't get away. I couldn't get sober. I couldn't hold down a job. I couldn't, all these things that I could not do, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard I wanted to. I was just powerless to do it. And it was to the point of either dying to myself or killing myself, and I chose to die to myself and give that to God and let God, look, God, here I am. I'm just a piece of crap. Everything. So you know what is in my heart. You know what I'm going through and what I've done to myself, and I can't do it anymore, and I need a way out. So,
would you say you were a believer before all of that, and just maybe weren't as practicing, or were you more of an atheist before this realization?
I would say that as a little bitty guy, I went to some Sunday school classes. I lived next to a church, and Mom would let me walk the block away to the church, and I would go down there and go to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. And I think that in Sunday school class, I actually said the sinner's prayer and asked Jesus into my heart way back then. But then I pretty quick fell into a lifestyle very opposite of that. And I would say deep down, I always believed.
Yeah.
I was never atheist. I may have been a little agnostic touch of agnostic, maybe, but I could never buy.
I've heard that a lot. So when you say
I could never buy into the fact of evolution, that was the thing that tripped me up. Was I never could believe that all this intricacy of existence came from an accidental, chaotic explosion where nothing exploded and made everything. I just couldn't buy that,
Me either. Honestly, I don't really know what the answer is, but I can't buy either one of them. Really, I don't know. It's way beyond my mind. So you also said you are a born again Christian. I've heard like when women use born again Christian, I've almost get this association of they are now considering themselves fresh virgins again, and like all of their sexual indiscretions in the past they don't really count anymore. That we're starting fresh. I don't suspect that's how you're using that. So for you, what's that mean?
Well, that is part of it, actually. But I say born again is I use the phrase earlier as well as like dying to myself. Mm-hmm. So what? In the Bible, you have a incident where one of the religious leaders of the day, Nicodemus, sneaks out at nighttime and meets up with Jesus, and he asks him, well, what do I have to do? And he said, "Marvel not, Nicodemus, unless you are born again, you cannot be saved." And Nicodemus asked him, "What do you mean? Am I supposed to crawl back up inside my mom and be born again?" and he said, Jesus says to him, "No." He says, you must be born of water, and then you must be born again of spirit. So basically, what you believe as a Christian is when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, there was a spiritual death that took place. Mm-hmm. And since that point, mankind has this drive or this desire for spirituality, because our spirit, our God-given spirit, has died in us, or we're not born with it anymore because it died in Adam and Eve. So when you're born again, that Holy Spirit of God comes inside of your heart, and you're born of the Spirit. Changes your mind, softens your heart to things of the Lord, and basically, it didn't happen all at once. But my attitude towards my worldview changed. Things that I used to be okay with, I started to think were probably not okay anymore, and I was convicted about certain things.
Right.
And it's a kind of a slow process. I heard for some people it's instant. For me, it wasn't like that. For me, it was, and I still work at it. It's
So basically, what you're saying is you're a little hard-headed, and it just took you a little while to kind of really get it to sink in. Is that a fair assessment?
that you could put it that way, I guess.
I totally get it. I'm the same way.
I would maybe say it's more of like you get used to a pattern or a behavior or even a habit, and it's like, stop biting your fingernails or stop smoking, or it takes a while sometimes for that to finally go away,
right.
or finally stop being attractive to you.
So now, I'm seeing the picture behind you. I assume you're a family man. You were talking to me on the phone earlier. You were putting the kids to bed and having dinner with them and whatnot. And I'm sitting there thinking, just based on what you just told me, I'm like, that is a wide, far cry different story that you have for yourself now than you did then. And I'm assuming all of that you lay at the feet of God then.
I do, yeah.
I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just making sure I understand where you're coming from. That's awesome. I'm glad you decided to make that turnaround. I'm glad you found something that offered some kind of a structure that allowed you to pick yourself up and get out of the position you were in. I mean, a lot of people get to rock bottom and they stay there, or even worse. And fortunately, I'm I'm super happy you made it past that, and you are now on the other side of things, regardless of how you came to it. Do I think you're crazy for being a believer? Maybe a little bit, but that's okay. See, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know about me is I used to be a Christian when I was younger, and there was just too many inconsistencies and things that didn't click with me. The same way you said the evolution thing never quite stuck or clicked for you.
Right.
It was kind of like that for me the other way, and eventually I ended up becoming an atheist. Well, when I first found my atheism, so to speak, I used to be like militant atheist, going attacking Christians and being rude to them, and just calling them idiots, basically. The immature, childish crap that you might do when you're in 6th to 12th grade,
Right.
However, as time's moved on, and I've learned a lot about the world, and I've become a lot more studied in these things, is if I was to choose a set of beliefs for somebody who didn't have the ability to come up with their own or research their own or something, I would put the Bible in front of somebody. I would put Christianity as that pedestal religion for others to follow if they don't have anything else, and because it's absolutely wonderful in terms of universal ethics and the modes of treating one another, and the whole treat others the way you would be treated kind of golden rule style sense to it, as far as most practicing Christians. Now the book itself is a whole nother story, pun intended, but as far as the actual people that practice the religion and what they tend to believe in general, it tends to be overall good, I think, for society. So I don't know if that helps clarify anything or not for you, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not on the attack. I'm actually perfectly okay with you believing the way you believe, as long as you let me believe the way I believe. And the discussions can be had, and I love having the discussions. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I honestly think that you and I have a very similar worldview. I don't know what your political leanings are, but I would say you're more libertarian.
No, my political leanings are none.
Okay.
No, and what it is it's interesting. The few labels, and people who've watched the show long enough have heard this. The few labels I attach to myself are atheist and anarchist. And really what those labels do is they just tell you what I don't believe. They don't tell you anything about what I do believe.
Right.
I don't believe in government. I don't believe in religion and God. I just don't. That's pretty much it. If you want to know me, you're going to have to talk to me, and you're going to have to get to know the details. Now, as far as politics goes, I would probably say more libertarian than anything else. Started out probably more Democrat when high school through maybe early 20s. And slowly, gradually, once I started listening to talk radio, I started hearing their ideas. I'm like, wait a minute, that makes a lot of sense. So I started becoming a Republican at some point. I never registered to be a Republican or nothing like that. But and then after I got bored of radio, which is funny because the story you said about getting tired of NPR and you started listening to another station. Well, I got bored of terrestrial radio and started listening to podcasts. And the beauty of podcasts is I could go out and just pick whatever topic I wanted, and somebody had a podcast on that subject. And so I could listen to all manner of discussions and debates and lines of inquiry. And it was amazing. I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Stefan Molyneux. And he has a couple books about anarchism and anarchy, everyday anarchy. And the other one is Practical Anarchy. And they're free ebooks you can get on his website. And I went through those and I started listening. I've been listening to the different arguments he had, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is like it hurt my brain at first, to be perfectly honest. It's like, what am I listening to? This is crazy. And introduced me to peaceful parenting also. So yeah, this gentleman was Stefan was the reason I don't spank my kids anymore. We negotiate. I treat them like, I wouldn't say like adults, but I do treat them like human beings, if that makes sense. It's just a fascinating, to me, it's a fascinating series of events. And I feel like I'm going way off topic here, but the general gist of what I was trying to say is, the only labels I attach to myself are just ones that tell you what I don't believe. That's it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I actually considered myself anarchist at one point in time, and then it was like you in the high school days. I thought I was liberal. I thought, and then I was I believed no government, and then I believed that whatever you do, as long as you don't hurt me, whatever. And one day I was working at a house in San Francisco, and I got out of the taxi cab, and the cab driver was like, "This is as far as I can go. You're going to have to walk from here." And I got out of the cab and I found myself right in the middle of the Gay Pride Festival in San Francisco. So
instantly you were no longer an anarchist, and you felt like government had to control these freaks that are. Sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Okay.
No, not quite. But I did realize that I wasn't liberal. I saw, first of all, whatever somebody wants to be is best between them and God. I'm not here to judge somebody who's not a Christian. It's not our job as Christians to judge non-Christians, because the world lives how the world lives, and you expect that. But what I saw at the Gay Pride was I saw the thing that really turned me off was I saw two naked men pantomiming a sex act in the middle of the street in front of. I mean, they're faking it, but still.
How do you fake it when you're naked?
Right.
I need details and pictures. Pictures, please.
Well, hang on. Let's see if I got a picture pulled up.
Send photos.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But it was that.
Kids, do not look that up. Do not look that up.
But what bothered me was while this was going on, which this made me uncomfortable in itself. But while it was going on, I look over and there's a lesbian couple, and they have little kids in strollers. Probably 3 to 5 years old, and they're pushing them in these strollers, and these kids are wide-eyed staring at these naked men, grinding each other and twerking and whatever. And I just thought, why would you want to take your innocence from your kids in that way? Why wouldn't you let their sexual being awaken in them in a more natural way than to plop them right in the middle of the lewdest display the United States has?
I totally get it. I totally get it. And it's funny because when I was a kid, all I had to do to stand out was maybe like spike my hair a little bit. That was that was enough to trigger the adults. But damn, now we're just straight up naked, grinding each other in the street in front of children. Anything to get attention, I guess. That's disgusting. Quite frankly, I would never do that even to my adult children. Like, I wouldn't do that in front of anybody ever. I don't know why.
Right. There's no reason to put that out on the street like that. So
you saw that, and then there was some kind of a shift or change in you.
Yeah. Then I decided, maybe I am conservative, actually. And then the more I researched politics, I kind of like the libertarian view of government, which is just less is better.
Right.
And what I finally landed on, if I had to put a label on it, I would say it would be a conservative constitutionalist.
Interesting.
I think our founding fathers had a stroke of genius, and I think that it was actually God inspired. But I think that the way they set up the nation as a constitutional democratic republic was amazing, and it was so self-governing. There's so many checks and balances in a properly functioning government that there's really no way that that you could ruin it in one presidency or one government cycle.
Yeah, the idea that if you can keep it, right?
Right. And I didn't think that one cycle could ruin it until this one started. I'm kind of a little nervous about Joe. I think he's sold out to China or something's going on here. So I don't know.
Yeah. Now, honestly, I don't know if it's just my natural aversion to authority or what that makes me kind of rebel against everything that's like institutional. And I noticed you said you went from being like an anarchist to more of a conservative, and you kind of compared an anarchy to a liberal viewpoint. And that's interesting because I consider myself an anarchist, but it's not a liberal viewpoint either. It's more of the ultimate extension of libertarianism. It's just instead of small government, it's no government at all.
Right.
I guess what did that mean to you when you were going down the path of anarchy?
Well, okay. I think that where my misgivings were in liberalism, I misunderstood what that meant. Mm-hmm. I misunderstood what it meant to be a liberal. And so the anarchist thing.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt. You're not using liberal and anarchist as interchangeable, are you? Am I just
no? Okay. No, I'm sorry if I sounded like that. But
yeah, just making sure I was clear.
I guess I had a foot in each puddle. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know. You're talking about, I was a young man. I was a little ignorant of politics and the ways of the world. And you know what it's like when you're...
Aren't we all?
It's like you have this cognitive dissonance that happens, and all of a sudden, like one day you wake up and you realize your parents aren't perfect. You wake up...
No, hold on. Whoa.
Well, yours
my parents aren't perfect.
Mine are screwed up. Yours are okay.
You might be right, actually. It didn't dawn on me until just now, but you might be right.
Oh, no, this is called cognitive dissonance. Are you okay? Is your head hurt?
I'm going to be okay. If I pass out, I'm going to need you to just continue the show without me. Can you Can you talk for like 10 minutes without interruption while I
can. I actually can, yes.
Oh, okay, good. I will let you. See you later.
No, wait. But,
Come back.
No, I just think that the only reason I shifted from feeling like I was an anarchist and I wanted a little more structure was I think that the extreme left made me realize that we do need a police force. We do need a military. We do need some sort of a government of representatives on the world stage. And that is what I think should be the limitation of government. I do believe that our government is grossly obese. It's way fatter than it needs to be.
Grossly obese. That's the right. Yes.
And I think that, really what you want and what I want are probably very similar. And maybe even the way we get there is very similar. I think that the only thing is that I say that my morality is instilled from God. Matter of fact, morality, period, is from God. And I think that, maybe I could be putting words in your mouth, but I think maybe you would think that morality is a social construct.
No, not at all. I think actually, I do appreciate. Again, that's one of the teachings from Stefan Molyneux that I picked up on. He's got a huge book called Universally Preferable Behavior, and goes into explain how we can derive morals apart from religion and that kind of thing.
Oh, I've heard morality ascribed to as a social construct, as in a tribal setting, people figured out what worked in a community and what didn't work in a community, and that's how morals came about. And I've heard it said that, but I think that
oh, you're talking about moral relativism, yeah? Yes. Yeah. No.
Yes.
No, I don't believe none of that. Basically, I'm kind of like on board with the "thou shalt not steal," murder, assault. That was it. That's the other one, assault. And pretty much it's all. Honestly, it's pretty much all you need. I mean, I don't know. That's one of the reasons why I am full anarchist is because the entire structure of the government is based on theft for its funding model. Like you literally, you agree when you say taxation is theft. I know the libertarian 100%. In you feels that deep within your soul, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, there's no moral principle in the Bible that says like thou shalt not steal unless it's a government governing body, in which case it's probably okay. Like there's no asterisk on there, nothing like that. It's just straight up, thou shalt not steal. Period. So if I had a choice between Christians running the world and anarchists running, governments running the world, governments or religion, I would choose religion every time. Insofar as they don't have power to, violate my principles. You actually have principles that you have to follow. And I'm like, hey, you do you, I'll do me. Leave me alone. You don't have the power of taxation at the end of a gun. You don't have that ability. Right. You have to, follow your own principles too, which is...
Can I ask you a question? What was it? What was it that made you decide? You say it was you found inconsistency was within the Bible that made you decide not to be a Christian, made you decide to be atheist? Or was it the way that people in the church acted?
No. I mean, it was a little bit of that, but not really. I'd say back when I started questioning things, it was the question of dinosaurs was the big one at the time for me. In my 6th grade mind, I'm like, wait a minute, the Bible don't say anything about dinosaurs. This timeline doesn't add up. I'm learning in science class that dinosaurs ruled the earth millions of years ago, but the Bible's saying, man and woman were like first here on like day 4 or whatever the day was. It's like it just wasn't quite clicking and adding up. And as I asked people the question, because I was genuinely like concerned, I was like, maybe there's a mistake somewhere, or maybe there's some good explanation for this. And at some point, as I'm sitting there asking all these different people and getting all of these different answers, it's like, wait a minute, wait, hold on, y'all don't even have an answer for something like pretty obvious like that? Like, what's up with this? And it was from that point forward where I really started like digging into the finer details and trying to figure out like what is real, what's not, what do I believe? Do I actually believe this? And why do I believe this? And it started bringing up a lot of questions for me. And that was just kind of like the snowball that got the ball rolling for me from there. I have heard a lot of good explanations for why. Right. Anywhere from, well, God has a different timeline from us. And so, yes, dinosaurs were there, but a day for God is like a million years or whatever for us, Like, okay, I guess I kind of see that, but maybe, but I don't know. What was another one? Oh, dinosaurs never existed at all, that they were actually made up. That there's no actual evidence that they existed, that carbon dating is completely fake and doesn't actually work, and it gives false readings. And I've heard all kind of answers, and that's part of the problem too, is I don't hear consistent answers across the board. There's so many different... Go ahead.
I think part of the problem is that there are not a lot of people who are properly studied in Scripture. Mm-hmm. You might hear somebody say, "Well, I've read the Bible. I know all about it." Well, no, you don't. Have you studied it? You can read. Say you read a Stephen King book, It. Okay, it's a big book. You read it from cover to cover.
Right.
Do you remember every single paragraph or every single top? I mean, no, you're not going to. You got to really, if you want to do that, you've got to study and study and study.
Hell, I could have just watched a movie, and 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait a minute, what order was that again? I don't remember.
Right. So the explanation that
I need to keep that in mind. Sorry, go ahead.
The explanation that I accept for the dinosaurs and carbon dating and all that is pre-flood, antediluvian society. Before the flood, the Earth was different, and there was a canopy that surrounded the Earth of they call it the firmament, a canopy of water that surrounded the Earth, and it didn't rain on the Earth. It just there was a heavy dew that would settle on the Earth in the morning, and that would water the vegetation, and then it would go back up, evaporate in the daytime. It didn't rain until the flood. And people, if you look at the biblical record, lived 900 years before the flood. And I think that what happened was when the flood happened and the sky broke open and all this water fell out and we lost this canopy that used to be in the sky, I believe it actually filtered out part of the UV rays or whatnot, something that's causing us to age now that differently than then. Which is also why carbon dating is faulty, because before the flood, the isotope did not degrade the same speed as it does now after the flood. Mm-hmm. So when you look at a carbon dating bone or whatever, and it says that it's 3 or 4 million years old, well, anything prior to the flood, I think you can't even tell the actual date. And that's why you have things like they find tools in a coal pit. Like there'll be a hammer and it'll be embedded in a chunk of coal. They found a steel hammer like that. Things like there's the place where you see a man footprint in the clay beside a dinosaur footprint, or there'll be a dinosaur bone, and it'll be between several different strata that are supposed to be millions of years apart within the Earth's crust. Mm-hmm. This dinosaur bone will be laying through all of them, or a tree will be growing through have grown through all of them. And I think the flood explains all this. Whereas when Noah was commanded to take 2 of every unclean animal and 7 of the clean onto the boat, male and female each, he took dinosaurs. What the Bible actually says is to take 2, male and female of each of its kind, which means that you wouldn't need to take a fox, a coyote, a wolf, a dog. You would take one of the canine genus. You wouldn't need to take a house cat, a bobcat, a cougar, a lion. You would take one of the feline genus.
Because they would eventually breed and evolve into all the other ones.
Right, microevolution, yeah. So, and you can see microevolution within a few generations of birds or certain mice or rats or whatever that they study.
Sure.
And so I do believe in microevolution, just not a macro species changing evolution. So I think that after the flood, the atmosphere has changed.
Isn't the difference between macroevolution, the way you're describing it, and microevolution and macroevolution, isn't the difference something like millions of years?
Yeah.
I think
the main difference is no matter how many millions of years you have, there's not any evidence within the evolutionary chain of jumping species. A cat doesn't become a dog. There's no transitory species that are half monkey, half person.
Oh no, I don't think it works like that anyway. I don't think a cat becomes a dog. I think there's some kind of like related species way before that. At some point, they branched off and became 2 separate things, or whatever the case is. Well, but it would just happen over like an amount of time that many of us have a incredibly difficult time even fathoming. Fathoming? Yes, fathoming. That's correct.
That's proper English. Yes. I think there's so many problems with that old billions of years concept anyway. Like, for example, we can measure the sun. We know that it decreases in size all the time. We know that the fuel is being burned up. It's shrinking in size. Mm-hmm. And if you were to reverse that measurable change back millions of years, it'll put the sun somewhere out past, like Jupiter or Saturn or somewhere out that the sun would be that big. And then another thing is the moon. We can measure the moon is the distance between the moon and the Earth is increasing, and if you reverse that over millions of years, you have a moon that's hovering 8 feet above the surface of the Earth. You know what I mean? And it's,
yeah, I don't know that they work that way. I haven't never heard anybody explain it quite like that before.
You can look it up. It's a measurable amount of energy that is burned. There's a formula for it of the sun.
I'm no scientist. I don't really pay much attention to space, but based on what you were saying, my first thought with the sun being much bigger in the past than it is now, and it would be basically out to Jupiter. What you were saying is, I'm picturing like just something more of a smaller phenomenon we've seen is like with fires in the fire pit. Where it starts off this roaring flame and it burns off all the easy to burn stuff, and then eventually goes down into coals, but then slowly continues to burn over time. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it was just a consistent burning speed throughout history. It may have started off really fast, and then it's just kind of at a point where it's just kind of real slow. I don't know exactly. That's just the first thing that maybe comes to mind as a potential explanation.
The more the more I looked into it, and I'm trying to pretend like I'm some kind of intellectual. I'm a 6th grade dropout. You know what I mean? Everything I know I learned after school, and from reading, and I did have a for learning, but it wasn't organized educational system that I was interested in.
I mean, I wouldn't sell yourself short. I mean, you sound like you're using big words, constitutional republic and things like that. It's like I wouldn't sell yourself short. I mean, there's a lot of studying you've done. I can tell you've done your research, you've done your homework, and you do enjoy learning, maybe just not in a traditional kind of way.
Sure.
And you're hard-headed, so it takes you a little time, but that's okay. That's all right.
That's true.
I get it. I'm the same way. Yeah. So I'm always fascinated by this. Is I hear a lot of these explanations for the existence of a deity or some sort, and at some point in the thought process, you have to make this giant leap into what I call therefore God. Like you have this thing that's unexplainable, but then you have this thing and it's in this other thing, and at some point you can't really explain it anymore, so you just fill in the rest of the coloring book with therefore God. And it's like, it seems like almost a too easy answer. And
right.
I get it. I totally get it. If you're a believer, you may not even see that you do it, but when I'm listening to the logic process of people going through why they believe what they believe, there is that jump that happens at some point, and I'd like to maybe see if we could find that for you here, because I'm trying to figure out, like, what is it, like, you explained all this stuff about the okay, I don't believe the Big Bang Theory, I'm quoting you here, you don't believe the Big Bang Theory, you don't, you've accepted or researched ideas where the sun was, like, super large, so it doesn't make sense, but at what point do you go from that to therefore God? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think, in the Bible, God says in Isaiah 18, I think it's 18:6 maybe. I have to look at it again. He says, "Come, let us reason together." So I think that God does not want us to be ignorant. He doesn't want us to be blind faith, although you hear that a lot. He wants us to be able to give a reasonable defense of our faith to other people that makes sense and it's well thought out and well thought through. And I think that one of the biggest reasons that people are turned off by the talk about God or organized religion or any of that thing is because they see so many people that profess to be a Christian or profess God and then live a lifestyle that would contradict that. You see these Catholic priests that are molesting boys, and you see these guys smiling pastors on TV that have 4 jets and just send me a little more money and God will bless you. And,
it's funny you say that, man. Sorry to interrupt, but it's funny you say that because I've examined my own life, and it's funny, as the atheist, I live a more Christian life than most Christians I know, and it's kind of sad and heartbreaking, to be perfectly honest. Yeah,
so look at this. Look.
You just changed your camera angle, homie.
The cat was pulling on the cord of the phone, so I had to.
Ain't that nice?
This is a new cat. It's for sale for $25,000 if anybody wants it, or I'll keep it.
Okay, it's very pretty. It probably evolved from a dog. I'm thinking,
or a chicken,
Yeah, it looks very fish-like.
Oh,
yes, very scaly.
Yes, I think that. Okay, where are you going to find in my reasoning the question and then God? For example, you mentioned the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say that if God spoke and said, "Let there be light," and the universe popped into existence, if you looked at that from far away, that would look like a Big Bang. It would look like nothing exploded and became something. Mm-hmm. So I think that when you're an evolutionist, you come to that point of the Big Bang, and what's before that is the what do they call that? They've got a special name for that.
Are you referring to the argument for infinite regression?
Well, I mean,
basically, the
I guess
idea,
there is that. There is
idea.
That too.
Are you going with are you referring to rather the idea that there's always kind of a cause, and like what happened before that? Okay, what happened before that? Okay, what caused that? What happened before that? Okay, what caused God? And then at some point you're like, well, I don't know what caused God. How'd he get here? and there's like this problem of infinite regression where there's no like starting point necessarily that we can fathom. I don't think anybody has the answer, quite frankly. Because
I agree 100%.
I think as you were alluding, I think as you were alluding to, it almost seems like God the creationism story and the Big Bang story are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like you were saying, from a distance from away from space, God's creation story could have looked like a Big Bang. It could have had there's no reason. God is all powerful. I mean, why couldn't he have created the universe that way? Like, why wasn't that his? I mean, that's very possible that they could be not interchangeable, but they're not mutually exclusive, is what I'm getting at.
Right, and I believe that it comes to a point even in evolutionists' theory that they rely on faith as well, where it comes to a point where you can't prove it. You weren't there. It's not actual science because it's not repeatable. It's not observable. And I think that that becomes a point where you have to have pretty strong faith to be a evolutionist as well.
Yeah, I'm really curious how it's not provable when macroevolution you kind of accept is really just, microevolution you accept is really just macroevolution with less time. Unless there's something I'm missing.
Well, maybe there is. I think that the microevolution is more explained as adaptation, environmental adaptation, and I think that to say that lightning struck a swamp and created life. But here's the thing: you have a better chance of evolving from a fish to a man than you do at going from proteins to life.
Going from no life to life.
Yeah.
That is the big question. That is the big question. But even that being said, at some point we do accept that life was created or life exists or somehow became to being. But none of that actually says, therefore, God. Right? I mean, regardless of what path you choose to believe, it's like there's no point in which that would just automatically jump to, therefore, God exists. You kind of get what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think that you're looking for a hard proof. Let me ask you, is there anything that could be said that would convince you that God exists?
Oh, good Lord. Probably, yeah. I mean, I'd need to see some real crazy-ass divine intervention type shit. I know he does it. He's done it before. I mean, it's not that hard to make believers out of people. I mean, he does speak to people. We have, at least according to the Bible, we have evidence of him speaking to people, intervening, taking control of situations in certain times, causing these great, big, huge, gestures, if you will, that would make you go, oh, yeah, that's probably God.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would be something. And I just don't. For me, it's even if it is proven that God does exist, I'm so disgusted with the stories in the Bible, the transgressions by God, the moral principles that are espoused that are then in the next chapter violated by God Himself. That it's like, even if He was real, I don't want anything to do with Him. I don't view Him as a good God. I've actually had a debate with a gentleman a few years back on this channel, where I took the position that God is in fact not good, and I provided multiple examples if anybody wants to go back and check that out. I'm in a weird position. Like I have a lot of incentive to not believe in God. I really do, because even if I do, that's fucking terrifying. Excuse my language.
Right.
Terrifying.
Right. No, you would have to. How do you reconcile a good God with God telling the Hebrew people to go into the land of Canaan and kill every man, woman, child, and animal, and burn every houses and not loot anything?
Right.
I mean, how do you justify the number of times that God has asked His own people to commit genocide? I understand that, and you can nitpick, you can pull pieces out of the Word of God, and it does sound horrible. The book of Leviticus is a big stumbling block for a lot of people. That Levitical law where, you can't wear two different fabrics that touch, or you can't eat, you can't boil a baby animal in its mother's milk. So Jews don't eat cheeseburgers, just in case that cheese comes from the mother of the cow the burger is.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes, of all the transgressions, that's probably the most evil, if I'm being perfectly honest.
And bacon, right? And no bacon.
Yeah, no kidding. So, yeah. There's, if there's a God exists and I can't have bacon, I'm going to say, you know what, screw you, dude. I'm having bacon. I don't know, man.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think what the hard thing to understand is that that law was written for a group of people that were wandering the desert, over 1 million people in a basically a camp, wandering the Sinai Desert for 40 years, and they're going to start a new nation, and they're coming out of a nation of idolatry and false gods, and child sacrifice, and using drugs to connect into the spirit realm, and demon worship and whatnot.
Right.
And
them dirty pagans and their false idols and whatnot. Yeah.
In order to separate out the people, which is what holy actually means, is just set apart or separated or different, right?
Right.
Unique. In order to set a people apart and start a nation, God set down these rules. And if you look at the root of all these rules, you can find a pretty good reason. There are some good arguments out there. Like, for example, I mentioned the genocide aspect of some of the biblical stories, where the prophet Samuel had told the first king of Israel, Saul, you're going to go take these people, you're going to go kill the Ammonites, you're going to go kill them, and you're not going to leave any person alive. You're going to kill all the women, you're going to kill all the kids, you're going to kill all the livestock, you're going to burn down the houses, you're not going to take any of the loot, you're going to leave it all. And man, that is hard to accept. That's a hard saying to. How do you reconcile a just, loving God ordering that?
Yeah, and also at the same time violating the concept of free will, by directing these people to do that, and the free will of the people who are going to get murdered as well. Who, like, I don't think it was within their will to get murdered by somebody that God sent after them. That would totally go against the what we're supposed to be believing is true.
Yeah, and there's a little misconception there, but I think that the whole aspect so what's going on is if you conquer a people, as a warring army, you're trying to conquer a land, and you kill all the men, you leave the women and children. Eventually, those women and children, the children are going to grow up and be men that are going to come kill you for taking their crap to begin with. And they were in such a state of evil, the Ammonites, where they were worshiping the Moak and Baal and those different gods, where it's child sacrifice, where it's temple prostitutes and homosexual prostitutes, and a lot of things that were going on. So that God didn't want.
Sorry, they were basically like doomed to eternal damnation and hellfire. So let's rush the process and get them there a little quicker,
huh? I don't know. I guess if I knew all the answers, I would worship the God.
If you knew all the answers, if you knew all the answers, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. You'd probably be on all the talk shows across the United States.
All right, you'd be worshiping me, right?
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, hey, he knows. He does have all the answers. Everything you'd say, like, that checks out. That checks out.
It is a horrible thing, man. And you can, if you look through the Old Testament, you can see kind of the evolution of God calls this one man Abraham out of the Ur of Chaldeans, where he's which is in Babylon, at ancient Babylon, where they're a nation of, again, false gods and idol worship, and he calls this one man out of that nation to start the Hebrew lineage. And through this man Abraham came Isaac and Ishmael. And of course, Ishmael was Abraham trying to fulfill God's promise under his own power, and he took Hagar, his wife's handmaiden from Egypt, and had Ishmael with her, who consequently became the father of the Arabs. And God blessed that boy, even though he wasn't the child of promise. God blessed that boy, and a great nation came out of him, and a warring people. He said there would be a warring people, and that came to be. And then you have Isaac, who was the son of promise, who was through his wife Sarah, and through him came eventually the Jews. But I think that to pull that out of what was, for example, he destroys the whole world in the flood because the only thought in man's mind, all the thoughts in men's minds were evil continuously. Kind of like it seems like today, a lot of these
right.
things are happening. But he wiped out with the flood, and it was only a few hundred years later was the Tower of Babel. And Nimrod, the mightiest king that ever, the first world ruler, was Nimrod. And they've tried to build the Tower of Babel. They were going to build this tower up to heaven and become like God. And at that point God destroyed them, destroyed the tower, and separated the people. And that's where the people races came from. They jumbled their languages, spread them out across the earth so they wouldn't come together again as one people and try and build a tower to the heavens again. And now we're in a spot where,
gosh,
we're not separate.
That sounds exactly like our U.S. government.
I was gonna say,
like we all try to get together and try to come to a common understanding, common cause, and it seems like these guys are up there on high, constantly trying to divide us and keep us separate from one another. They're literally, I mean, we literally have different ways of speaking between these different factions. I mean, if you listen to Ben Shapiro versus David Pakman, you're going to hear like different vocabulary between the two. It's very interesting that's kind of a very parallel structure. I've always thought the whole religion thing and government were very synonymous with one another in many ways.
Sure. Well, I mean, the governments are based upon religion. They're just bastardized, right? They're just.
Hey, I resent that. My parents were not married when I was born. Okay. You'd be nice. You'd be nice.
It's okay. I got this kitten over here scratching at the floor. I'm gonna have to. You sure you don't want a kitten? I can mail it to you. I can put it in an envelope and.
I don't have $25,000, homie.
Okay.
So,
but yeah, I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Another big question for me for Christians is how. Okay, so a lot of, or if not most of, I would say for some people, all of the information they get comes from the Bible or comes from other practicing Christians. So it's like this giant game of telephone, or it's like kind of like the example you said earlier. For those who aren't studied in it, you sit there, you read the book It, and after a while you're like, I can't even remember exactly what they said. I got to go back and study it some more. The problem I have is that for years, for hundreds of years, from if I remember my timelines correctly, the Bible was oral tradition. It was passed down strictly mouth to mouth. It was just kind of taught in stories and fables and tales and things like that, passed on from generation to generation before it was ever written down. And then once it was written down, it was gotten a hold of by the controlling elites who were able to read, who were disseminating the information to the followers in some fashion that made it kind of convenient for them, kind of conveniently omitting certain details and whatnot. There's many instances of things being changed or altered, or just basic human mistakes being made, things like that. And then at some point we finally got to actually print the books out and people got to read them. And now that they're printed out, you have so many different versions of the same book that say different things, kind of the same story, but then again, it's the evolution thing. Over a certain amount of time, you tend to start to turn into something that you didn't originally start as, if that makes sense. And so I guess the problem for me is like, if that's where you're getting all your information, like how do you know? Like how do you know it is true? Like what do you have that isn't the book, or what proof do you have that book is legit or isn't missing some vital important piece, like a line that says, "Hey, if you eat bacon, instant ticket to heaven, homie." I don't know what the example would be, but maybe there's some very, very important piece missing that maybe back in the day it didn't make sense for the elites to put it in because it would kind of make it where they couldn't have such easy control over people and telling them what to do, or whatever the case is. It's just like how do you rectify that in your mind?
Well, I think that. Well, that's a good question.
I mean, it's okay if you don't have an answer right now or anything. I'm always curious about how that works.
You covered a lot of ground there with that. So first of all, I would start by saying the oral tradition of the Bible only lasted until Moses left Egypt, and that's when the Pentateuch was written. And I think that most scholars believe that the book of Job was actually around before that. Mm-hmm. So you've got if you go by the biblical timeline, roughly about 6,000 years from creation to now, and the Bible has been around for 4,000 of those years about. So you have copies of the Pentateuch that were in Hebrew, and then they as they transcribed them and copied them down.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. Sorry. You were selling yourself short about I've only got a 6th grade education. I was a 6th grade dropout, but I've graduated high school. I've gone to college, and I've never in my life heard the word Pentateuch. And here you are rattling
Pentateuch. That's the Hebrew word. I'm sorry. The Pentateuch it means 5.
Yeah, what I'm saying is don't sell yourself short, man. You're very smart. You know some shit, okay?
Well, thank you, sir.
You're doing just fine.
But okay, so the first 5 books of the Bible, which you've got Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and that's the books of the law, and that's what God handed to Moses on Mount Sinai, along with the 10 Commandments. That was all part of what God directly came from God to Moses.
Right.
So therefore, that's why that's inerrant. It came right from God to Moses.
Yeah,
as the story goes. Yeah. So then you have God's people, the Israelites, the Hebrews, who over time would recopy. They'd have a copy of it on parchment. It was deteriorate over a generation or so. Mm-hmm. They would make another copy, and they were so meticulous in the way that they copied it that they would copy it line by line, right? And then they would count what they're copying from. They would count over 6 letters or 7 letters, and they count 7 letters over, and it's the same letter. It's good to go. If they find one mistake on a page, they would get rid of the page, start all over. They wouldn't correct the mistake. They would throw the page away and start over. Mm-hmm. So they're very meticulous in the way the scribes wrote it down. As a matter of fact, when they wrote the Hebrew word for God, they would actually use a special pen that the priest had blessed, and they would write the word for God, and then they would not use that pen again. That pen would be destroyed or burn up or whatever. So it was very meticulously copied. All right, all the way up until
I've never heard this. This is very interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, all the way up until the time of Jesus. So you have the Textus Receptus and the Latin Vulgate, which were both around the time of Jesus, and then which is what the Bible Jesus had would have been, and then after Jesus, most scholars believe within the first 70 years, most of the New Testament books had been written down, and the majority of them were collected together within the first 100 years or so after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. So that when the first books were circulated, most of the New Testament were letters from the new churches from the apostles to the new churches. And as one church would get this letter and they would read this letter, they would copy it down, they would send it to the next church. And so essentially there are more copies within the first 200 years after Christ's resurrection. There are more copies of the New Testament than any other classic piece of literature in existence, yet we don't question those. For example, the works of Plato, the works of Socrates, the Iliad, Homer's Iliad. There are more copies of, I think the Iliad, there's like 7 original copies that were, I think 500 years is the closest to the life of Homer, that the oldest copy is that we have. And we have copies of, matter of fact, the Dead Sea Scrolls were 1,500 years before Christ. They find the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the book of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls is nearly word for word the book of Isaiah that we have today, almost 3,500 years later. So it's, in my mind, if there's an all-powerful God mm-hmm. who can speak and creation happens, things come into existence by him speaking, then he's able to protect his word from nefarious characters. Now, do I believe that there's been attempts to change it? Most definitely. And there's translations out to this day that are really misrepresentations of what it actually says, are very loose translated.
And how would you know that?
Well,
Like how,
we
like
have
you've chosen one to believe. Like, how would you know that that one's the correct one, and the one that the misrepresentations isn't actually the correct one? That God, put his mouth on and said, "Hey, this is actually the real one, guys." And they wrote it, and then you look at it, and go, "No, that's not accurate, because this one over here is the one that's correct. It's the one that matches the original one." But then again, that original one could have been also tampered with by man. And God hadn't yet put protection over that particular version. Are you with me
I
on
get
that?
what you're saying. I am. And I would say that, first of all, we have, like I said, the Greek and Hebrew texts of the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Right.
That are all the copies that we have are nearly identical. And they're up to, I think, maybe the oldest copy we have is maybe 200 years after Christ.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't really have an issue with your retelling of the chain of custody that's been unbroken and seem to be pretty. So
the point I'm getting to is that most of the translations that we have today that I say are in error,
right,
are recent translations. If you go back to the original Greek and Hebrew, which you can, it lines up with pretty much like the King James Version or New King James Version or whatever, or New American Standard Version of the Bible, which are translations, not actually versions. They're just translations from the Greek into modern English.
I do get what you're saying. I know you brought up like the Iliad and whatnot, but the problem with those books is they aren't exactly proclaiming to be how the universe started. They're not actually claiming they're stories, right, and we recognize them as such. So it's not as much pressure and importance to make sure we get this right.
Exactly.
As far as like, again, the chain of custody, that might have been pretty on point, but I'm sitting here thinking about how well we're handling simple chain of custody of our U.S. vote right now. Like, we can't even figure out what's real or what's fake in our U.S. vote about something that just happened this year.
Yeah.
If you've ever tried to play a game of telephone with somebody, like, you can't, like, oh my God, like in a classroom setting between 20 kids, like, the good luck getting the last kid to say the same thing as the first kid. So, I just don't see, yes, the written text translations may have been immaculately well kept throughout the last few thousand years. And yes, there might be some changes now, but again, that's not really addressing the hundreds of years of oral tradition before. Mm-hmm. It was even, there's just so much, again, this is just a concern of mine in terms of how do we know this is real, is that, matter of fact, I got to get it out. I keep teasing it and keep saying it. There's a piece I'm working on that if I was to become a Christian, or if I was to start believing in God, my very first prayer would be for a Bible rewrite. And I go on and give a bunch of details about what it would require to make sure that this thing is legit, no questions asked, protected by God, checked and double checked and made sure and everybody accepts it. I'll put that out here soon and let you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that particular thing. But that would be honestly my first prayer. It was like, hey, let's get this message clear, because there shouldn't be any question. This is supposed to be your guide stone, your book, your set of directions for how to make it into heaven, how to live a good life and not end up burning in hell or whatever.
Right.
It seems pretty important that if I'm an all-powerful God and I can do all these all-powerful things, that there should be some way that I should be able to make a Bible or make a written text that is impossible.
Infallible?
Yeah, impossible to misunderstand. And then that way I can understand the argument for free will. Like, okay, I've given you this book. This book is impossible to misunderstand. I know, because I'm God, I know you. I know that you understand this. And you have chosen, you have used your free will to choose to go against it. Like, that would make sense.
I think that's the way it is now.
That would make sense
in my mind
to me. That would make, I don't know, that would be my first prayer. But that's just kind of where I'm at.
Absolutely.
As far as that goes.
Absolutely. And I think, and I agree with you 100%. It's, I actually think that we have that. And I think the problem is that, Satan is a father of lies and the author of confusion. So I think that, for example, after Jesus was baptized by his cousin John the Baptist, he went into the wilderness for 40 days and fasted. And at the end of the 40 days, Satan tempted him. And when Satan tempted Jesus himself, he used scripture, misquoted scripture out of context, twisted scripture. And so I think that the awfulness
it's tough,
of it is,
it's tough, isn't it?
yeah, is that it has the Word of God has been used time and again for nefarious purposes, and it has been used. A lot of evil has been done in the name of God because of that book being misinterpreted or kept from the people. For example, the Catholic Church in the beginning, the Latin Bible was chained to the pulpit, and the common man wasn't allowed to even look at it, nor could they even read Latin.
Right.
You weren't allowed to learn Latin unless you were, in the Jesuit priesthood. And I think
that's messed up, man. That's messed up.
It is so messed up. It is very messed up. And Catholics are, I believe there's a lot of Catholic people that love the Lord and are really truly seeking, but I think the higher ups and from the Pope, down are probably satanic, man, if I had to come right down to it, because, they've done a lot of evil. I still think that to this day, the Pope does a lot of evil crap and says a lot of things that are
that is interesting.
Not.
Sorry, well, I was just thinking when you said that, what was that verse you said of Satan is the author of confusion?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? I'm sitting there thinking about that. Man, if I'm the bad guy in the story and I'm trying to make the other guy look like a kind of an asshole, I would say, you can't trust that guy. He's just trying to confuse you. Trust me.
Oh,
believe me.
Right?
He's just trying to like cloud your mind, man. I've actually heard, I don't believe it, of course, because I don't believe any of it, but I've heard some interesting perspectives where they say Satan was actually the good guy, and here's why, and they lay out some arguments for it. Not that it's going to change your mind, but it is kind of an interesting perspective to see things through the lens of the other guy. It's kind of cool.
You have the whole the whole Luciferian thing too, where you've got this whole religion based upon the angel Lucifer,
right?
Which is actually the fallen angel who is now Satan, and I think that's maybe it's the Freemasons that have their own Bible, and they're Luciferian. The Illuminati, that's Luciferian people.
That's a step too deep for me. I don't pay attention to that stuff. I don't know.
It's pretty crazy. And I can say with 100% certainty that the most vile things that have ever been perpetrated on this planet have come in the name of religion. Whether it's the Jews doing it to the Amalekites, or whether it's the Muslims doing it to the Christians, or whether it's the Christians doing it to the pagans, or there's been a lot of horrible things done in the name of God, and I have that that is not God's will. It's very easy to take a book of authority and use a person who maybe is not able to read, or maybe does not have an understanding of that you have, right, and twist that and keep the truth, only let enough of the truth out. The best lies are 90% truth, right?
Oh yeah,
most believable lies. So I think that's what it comes down to. That's why you've got a being here, Satan, who's been around since the beginning. He's seen it all. He knows the Bible better than any Christian that's ever walked the earth. I guarantee it. He knows it, every word in that book. And he knows how to twist it to trick you and trick me. And even as a Christian, I would be a liar to say I don't get tricked sometimes still yet. Fall into temptation. I sin. We all do that.
Right. You mean you're not perfect?
Well, not yet.
Is that what you're trying to convince me right now?
Well, I didn't say that out loud.
He said not yet.
I guess.
Oh, hell no. He said not yet. Yes, but I mean, yeah. It's definitely something to strive for sure. For sure.
But, I can agree 100% that an atheist does not need the Bible to do a good deed, and a Christian can do evil things in spite of the Bible.
Right. Absolutely.
Be in their book. So, and that's the human nature, right? You love people, and the people that you love, you want to do things for that are kind. And even if you do a kind thing for a stranger that makes you feel good, that's actually self-serving, because you get the blessing, you get the joy.
Yeah, you get a little bit of happy go-go juice for absolutely.
And that's universal. That doesn't matter what you're...
Unless you're a narcissist, in which case that really hurts your feelings to help others.
That could be. Speaking of narcissists, one of the things I cannot stand, and can we actually speak out against it right now is you see these people that film themselves giving food to the homeless, or
Yes.
they'll pick a homeless guy sitting on the street and they'll give him $100 bill and film him to see where he goes and what he spends his money on, or they'll take a selfie of themselves giving a homeless guy a McDonald's cheeseburger and aren't I the best? Look how awesome I am. How insensitive is that to the person who's down on their luck and has nothing and who has to swallow their pride to take that? Man.
That's a tough one. Honestly, that's a really tough one, and I do agree with you that it's kind of low budget, but I'm also thinking, on the other hand, how many people see that video and then go, man, I haven't thought about doing anything like that for a while, but I'm going to go do that. And they may not film themselves doing it, but now because they saw that video and it triggered a memory, it might actually have a positive, result.
I suppose a broken clock's right twice a day,
well,
right?
I mean, yeah, even though the individual filming himself seems a little kind of, I don't know, man. That seems, self-centered would be a good word for it. But then again, you don't know what the overall effect is down the road. It could, again, I've done it. I've seen acts of good deeds done and been like, I'm feeling like I need to kind of participate too. I haven't, done anything nice for someone in a while. I'll do that too. I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag for me. I can't really condemn them too much. I wouldn't necessarily send them to hell for it, but it's probably in bad taste.
I don't think I would either. I wouldn't send my worst enemy to hell if I could help it. And I'll tell you, I believe that God doesn't send anybody to hell. I believe they choose that, and He lets them have what they choose. And I think that when He lets people go to hell for not believing and not accepting the free gift of salvation, that He'll do it with tears in His eyes. I think it's going to hurt Him to see His creation choose. Hell was not created for people. It was created for the fallen angels. It was created for Satan and the angels that fell with him as their eternal punishment.
Look, and, I already know that's not true because I've heard all the St. Peter's Gates jokes and whatnot. That's not true. That's not true.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is true. That's St. Peter's sitting at a gate somewhere. Yeah.
I know that. Like, I don't know whether he's the luckiest dude in history or he's like the unluckiest dude in history, because that dude's shift never ends.
Right. He's
just sits like there all the time.
The worst doorman job ever.
Like, I would love to see like a book written from St. Peter's perspective of all the stories he's had to hear. Like, each one's going to start with something like, "You're not going to believe this one. This guy come up to me," and it's going to just be a jokes from St. Peter's perspective. Anyway, I don't know. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss today? I mean, we can always do another episode sometime, but is there anything urine and burning you got going on that you want to?
I think that I just wanted to just tell you where I was coming from as a Christian, and I am more than willing to, if you want to pick a topic. We could talk for days. There's so many different facets of this belief.
Yeah, absolutely.
That are worth a discussion, I think. Hey, we don't really know each other that well, but we are related. And even though, I love you, man. I'm not in a gay way or nothing, and not even in a family way. I love you in a way that you're a fellow man, and I don't want to see anybody that I know.
Except you just assume my gender. I'm sorry. I'm taking your moment away. I apologize.
You. I'm sorry. I should not have assumed your gender.
Yeah, don't.
Do you prefer the, they?
No,
Z,
he's fine. He's
Zer,
fine.
Zim.
I would just prefer you not assume it. That's all. No, you got it right. You got the right one. I can tell you assumed it. Sorry.
Yes. It's the beard that threw me off a little bit.
Look, this has been a fantastic discussion. I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better, and I look forward to doing more. And look, if anybody's watching this and you wanted to have a similar discussion, or if you want to see Mr. BJ come on back on the show again and for a future episode, please let us know. Be glad to have him along. I hope y'all learned a little something. And honestly, I feel like this was way more productive than any kind of Facebook back and forth would have ever been. And I'm constantly asking people who I start getting in discussions with, because I can tell it's going to become a big time suck, is, hey, come on the show. Let's talk about it. It's much easier to talk than it is to text. And it's much easier to, get the ideas out than it is to sit there and type and spend hours doing that. I got shit to do, man.
Right.
So I do appreciate you taking me up on my offer and coming on today. It does mean a lot to me.
Well, Daniel, I'm so glad you didn't really get me with a bunch of gotchas and beat me up too bad. And I actually enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the conversation, man. I think you have honest, genuine questions, and I respect your viewpoint. And I think that I don't even know if I would say that you're a hard atheist. I might even say you might be a little agnostic, like you just don't know. Like you haven't seen enough proof
just atheist.
To believe that.
Just atheist.
Just don't believe it at all.
Definitely not an agnostic. And if there is a God, I tend to believe he's probably more of an uninvolved God that doesn't really meddle in human affairs. It would make me feel much better that maybe he's just not an evil prick. But
yeah, for sure.
And listen. I respect your views as well, and I thank you for coming on and discussing them with me. I think that's the difference between genuine curiosity and somebody who's just trying to bat you over the head with your own belief system. I genuinely want to know where people come from. I love learning people's paths to come to the beliefs that they come. As you can tell from the beginning of our conversation, the journey we took from what you said from liberal all the way to constitutional Republican or constitutionalist rather, and my journey from that's the point. It's a constant journey. We're always growing. We're always changing. The things that we said 10 years ago probably don't apply today, but yet if it's caught in a tweet, it'll get held against us 10 years from now. But that's okay.
This is truth.
That's okay. So
this is truth. So I have one request for you before we end this video. Is there any way that you can get me an autographed picture from Agatha Christie?
An autographed picture from Agatha? Matter of fact, I do believe I can.
I would be stoked for that. I could put that in my youth pastor's office at the church, and it would be a great conversation starter.
Excellent. I will definitely talk to Billy and let him know, and I think that is something we can easily get for you. Nice. So what a great note to wrap on. Y'all have been watching the Unframe of Mind show, where we have uncomfortable conversations without a condom. This has been no different. I really enjoyed this. And until next time, y'all peace out. Have a good day.